I have tremendous respect for what the Finnish people have done. They are one of the most profound success stories in education in the world today, and I think that like America in particular could really stand to examine what they've done. The first thing that I think is really important is that Finland's school system was not always very good. And in fact, after the Soviet era, it kind of came to the point where they were lagging behind many other European countries. In fact, we're pretty close to where we are in the ranking too, kind of mid-range. And the thing that they did is that they decided that they wanted a world-class education system. They just, as a people, democratically, they said that this is what we want. We want to have the best education system in the world. And whatever it takes, whatever sacrifices we have to make, we're going to ensure that our children have the best education possible. And with the belief that their society would benefit from it. And so, their success story is like a 30-year-long story, and it was actually the generation previous to the one which is teaching now in Finland, which started these reforms in action. And so I think one of the most important things to remember is that this kind of change does not happen overnight. It comes from a very committed populace, a group of people who are willing to be in it for the long haul for kids. The most important, the things you brought up are among the most important things that Finland does. We know that pre-K schooling, especially preschool, is one of the best indicators of a child's future success in academia. And that 1 year before you go to kindergarten, where you're introduced to the norms of school and you begin language acquisition and stuff like that, are some of the most essential and some of the most necessary times in a child's life. Here in America, as far as I know, there's maybe 1 or 2 states, probably Massachusetts and then Oklahoma, weirdly enough, that provide, kind of state-funded pre-K education, which is profoundly affecting those kids' test scores too. The other thing that Finland does is that they don't test their kids to death like we do. Here in America, we have this obsession with accountability. We feel like if data can't be quantified, if you can't, tell on a spreadsheet whether or not someone knows what they're doing or is being a good teacher or understands the curriculum or something, then we can't be bothered with it. And so there's this insistence, because in America there's this obsession with public funded schools. There are political parties that just question the entire premise of having a publicly funded school system, so they look for any reason at all to justify it. Finland took a completely different point of view. They came to the opinion that they were going to trust and nurture their schools instead of constantly subjecting them to these accountabilities. In America, the accountability almost has nothing to do with kids, it has to do with teachers, because there are political parties which resent the amount of money and tax revenue which goes to teachers. And as a result, they want to prove that that money is being well used, so the only way to do that is to test relentlessly, to hold everyone accountable. And I think it's a corporate mindset. It's a mindset that has nothing to do with the realities of education, and Finland rejected it roundly. I think in Finland they have maybe 1 or 2 summative assessments, like a big you're getting out of high school assessment, and then maybe another one sometime at the end of elementary school roughly, and that's it. And they just devote themselves to that, and they rely far more on the professionalism of the teacher to assess kids. So instead of these big nameless tests that come out of nowhere and are committee written and usually have a ton of corporate influence, they trust the teacher themselves to make that assessment.
If I'm correct, a teacher has to have a master's degree.
Yes, and not only that, as is often mentioned, especially by teachers like me, they pay teachers a professional wage. And there's a cultural difference too. You see this in South Korea as well. South Korea has the number 2 school system, which is interesting because it's almost completely opposite from Finland. But and yeah, you have to have a master's degree, but you're paid almost kind of the equivalent of like an engineer, like a professional. Furthermore, culturally, teachers are held in much higher regard. Here in America, there's still, even though Americans pay a lot of lip service to loving teachers and stuff, and although there is a lot of popular support for teachers, there is also teachers is completely different. So first of all, there's an assumption that in America that people still hang on to, that teachers are sort of low-rate, bureaucratic government wage slaves, basically. They teach because they can't do anything else. They get summers off and they're lazy. They get these unions and they get tenure, and all they want to do is just squeeze all the money out of the system, and they're not even doing that well anyway. In Finland, it's just completely different. The teachers are venerated. They're like, we want the best and brightest, the top members of any given graduating class go into teaching foremost. It's that, it's that attractive of an option. In America, especially in a state like Idaho, with stagnant falling wages, increasingly draconian and cruel oversight that's being imposed on teachers, you end up with a profession that doesn't attract the most talented people. If you're graduating from Harvard or, wherever, Stanford, something like that, you might get involved with like Teach for America or AmeriCorps or something like that, in which you receive no pedagogical training whatsoever. You go to some inner city high school, and feel really proud of yourself because you student teach for a year and then leave. Then you go work at as a hedge fund manager, or you go where the money is, usually in corporations. In Finland, because because teachers are paid so well and they're respected so much, they attract those kinds of people. And they hold them to that standard. They won't settle for cut rate teachers. They won't settle for teachers who aren't up to date on the most contemporary findings and the most contemporary study that goes along with education. I mean, it's as if you were to look at a mirror image of America, and all of the complaints that Americans make about teachers are just completely resoundingly refuted by the example of Finland. For example, teacher unions. In Finland, they have 100% union involvement. 100%. Here in America, you would think that teacher unions are ruining the whole situation. There's a lot of pushback against teachers' unions and wanting to bust them up, and things like this tiered licensure program that they're trying to do here in Idaho, which I think is a horrible idea, is just designed to pit teachers against each other, cause them to have to fight each other for their own jobs, and basically exclude them from all kinds of opportunities. In Finland, they encourage that professional development. They encourage participation in unions. The other question is, if you pay teachers really, really well, you're going to waste all this money because they're just going around. In Finland, it's a completely different point of view. I know the Common Core is extremely controversial, and the longer I'm involved with it, the more I understand the criticisms of it. In general, I'm a strong proponent for Common Core, and not all teachers are, but I definitely am. Because one of the lessons that Finland taught us is that students are best equipped to deal with our 21st century situation if they are taught in a very particular way. And that way has a name. It's called inquiry instruction. And essentially what it means is it's discovery learning, basically. And it means that instead of students sitting in rows memorizing facts or data, which has been the traditional way of teaching for decades, it is encouraged instead that students discover that data for themselves by basically using the scientific method. And if you look at Finnish curricula, that's all it is. It is discovery learning. It's just crazy stuff. Things that in America would be blasphemous. Like, Finnish kids have almost no homework at all. Yet they're the highest performing kids in the world. They have all this outside time, like in Finland. They get something ridiculous. It's like an hour, 2 hours, just outside, in nature and stuff. Like all of these things that in America would be considered impossible or ridiculous or kind of hippie BS that would never work. Finland just keeps proving over and over again that it does work, and it works way better than the system we have. And they embrace this inquiry instruction. They embrace the idea of kids making meaning instead of just absorbing meaning from their teachers. And in America, there's huge resistance to that, especially from teachers. We have a population of teachers, especially as a result of No Child Left Behind, that are just interested in shoving as many facts and as many bits of trivia into a kid's head as they possibly can, and then regurgitating that same information on a test. Well, in a digital age in which information is a moment away, the problem isn't storing and keeping information, it's dealing with it. It's sorting through it and making judgment calls about it, doing the kind of really sophisticated critical thinking that's going to be necessary for us to survive climate change and the oil shortages that are just around the corner and world turmoil that gets worse by the day. How in the world is sitting in a room memorizing the dates of the Magna Carta or parts of speech prepare kids for any of that crap? And so, Finnish kids are going to be prepared. They're able to think critically and independently, and they're willing to. They don't need answers handed to them. They can pursue them for themselves. In America, we're still, trying to teach kids in a way that was considered old-fashioned in the 1930s. And as a result, it's really stagnating us. And I would say teachers are as much to blame as anyone for that too, because they've taught one way for 20 years, and they're not very eager to look at it from a different perspective. But I'll tell you what, if we don't do some serious stuff, and I think Common Core in general is a step in the right direction, but if we don't start doing some stuff, we are going to really seriously lag behind as a nation. And we're already seeing, I think we rank like next to Estonia or something in like in those like international standardized tests. Like, it's pathetic. America once prided itself on having the best education system in the world. And now, especially because of certain political denominations who are just hell-bent on, depriving education of its funding, depriving education of its stature as an opportunity for private institutions, corporations to move in and do it. And you see that in the boom with private colleges like Phoenix and Concordia, which are horrible things that just exploit people who are trying to improve their lives. You see it in charter schools. You see all these attempts to try and destroy public education and turn it into a private enterprise. In Finland, they never let that happen. They would never even consider it because education was a public good. Everyone shared the responsibility communally, and a good education shouldn't just be relegated to those kids who can afford it. And so all of these combined reforms, I mean, really, it's like 6 or 7 wonderful things that they've done, have made a really good education system, and one that, like, I'm glad that Americans are looking at more seriously. But yeah, that's my take on it. Anyway. Yeah.